you I've met before, but not all of you. I'm Katie Platten, and I'm on the board of the Prairieland Market, and I am just a hobby cook and a hobby canner. I think I've told everybody that was here before that I've probably been canning for about 40 years now, but I've never taught a canning class. I've taught people how to can. And it's been kind of fun, this journey of teaching canning classes, because I'm actually expanding my repertoire, practicing things so that I can teach them. But anyway, so today we're going to do applesauce. And this is going to be a pretty simple class because applesauce is really just, most of the other classes we've done 2 recipes. So I did actually make a couple of other recipes with apples because it is still apple season. So I've also made, for us to taste this class, some caramel apple jam.
Oh, God.
And also apple lemon preserves, which is what's over the top of this cream cheese.
Stop.
So we'll sample all 3, the applesauce that I made for this class, the preserves, and the caramel apple jam, and then you can go, and all those recipes are in your booklet. So yeah, so I will tell you something funny. The caramel apple jam asks you to melt the sugar in a dry skillet, 3 cups of sugar, which I had never done before. And it took me not 1, not 2, but 3 batches before I didn't burn the sugar. So that part was it was 9 cups of sugar by the time I got done to make 1 batch of caramel apple jam. But just so you know, yeah.
An electric jam thing wouldn't have,
No, I made it on a stovetop.
not in the
And I don't
electric-
think the electric jam thing, it's not really set up to, you're actually putting sugar in a dry skillet and heating it until it melts. And then what I found is I'd let it, after it all melted, I let it sit took it off the burner and let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then put boiling hot water in when I added the water, because if I put the water in just room temp or right away, that's when my sugar burned, which I didn't get. Like that should be when I'm cooling it down. So anyway, so let's go ahead and get started. There's lots of ways that you can make applesauce. The recipe that we're going to taste today is one where I peeled all the apples first, peeled them and cored them, and then cooked them and just mashed them with a potato masher. The recipe that we're going to make today, I got the apples from my brother who grows them, and they were all super duper tiny. So I decided I just can't peel and core all of these. So another way to do applesauce is to do it with the peels on, and then you just puree the peels into the applesauce so that they become part of the applesauce. I wouldn't recommend it unless you've got a fairly powerful blender, because otherwise I think you're going to get a little bit of that peel grain, you know. But we'll talk about all the ways that you can make applesauce today as we're making our applesauce. I was worried about time cutting up all these small apples, so I guess I should leave this over here. I ended up cutting them up yesterday, and then it didn't even really take me that long because I didn't have to peel them. I just used that little segmenter and corer, and then I stuck them in water mixed with fruit fresh. So this is what I did. And has everybody used one of these? Just a real simple. I've learned that buying a new one is well worth it because the sharp blades make it a lot easier to do that. So the recipe in your book is from Ball. Got that mostly. And it calls for, what does it say, 7.5 to 10.5 pounds of apples. When I made this first batch that's already canned, I started out with 7.5 pounds of apples, and then I used my KitchenAid, we'll talk about this in a little bit, to peel them and core them. So when I got all done, I had exactly 5 pounds of apples, and it made 6 jars of applesauce for me. So This time I started out with 8 pounds. I left the peels on, but cored them, and I ended up with 6.8 pounds of apples. So I'm thinking, woo, that's a really full pan. So I'm thinking we're gonna get a bigger yield out of this because the cores have been left on them. So, and then again, it's really your choice. These apples that my brother grew are really flavorful and kind of sweet, tangy. So I'm using all the same apple. When I made the ones that we're gonna taste today, I used about a third local Gala apples, a third local Jonathan apples that I got at the market, and then just to add some tang, because I always like a little bit of tang to my applesauce, I bought some Granny Smith apples from the grocery store. So I kind of did a third and a third and a third. And they just say that if you kind of change up your and use different types of apples, you can get a little bit more complexity of flavor, but it's entirely up to you. So anyway, cut these apples. I use the Ball Fruit Fresh color protector. So as I'm cutting them, I put them in water that I had mixed the Fruit Fresh into. I would highly recommend this if you don't want your stuff to turn brown. And then I just stuck them in the fridge overnight, and now here they are. And so this calls for 1 to 1.5 cups of water, and because of the...
anything in the pan before you got the apples in? There's just an empty pan?
I'm sorry?
The pan was just empty when you put the apples in?
Yeah, nothing in the pan, just a dry pan.
Okay.
Very full of apples. And so I'm gonna go ahead and use 1.5. And the amount, this is one of those recipes, remember when we talked about tomatoes, where it's almost like you're canning each one, I mean, each jar is its own kind of recipe. Applesauce is kind of hard to get wrong. There's 2 risks with applesauce, and one is that you'll scorch your apples because you have too hot of a pan. And the other one is, and I've never had this happen to me, but a lot of people complain that their apples siphon in the canner. And the siphoning means, so you're getting everything really hot, and what's happening is, and the reason we only put the lid on fingertip tight is because it forces the oxygen out of that jar and then creates a vacuum seal inside the jar, which is how it's shelf stable now. But sometimes different foods will siphon, which means instead of just the oxygen going out, the fruit or the broth or whatever else will also go out into the pan. It doesn't, as long as you get a seal, it's not a food safety issue, but sometimes it's a pretty issue. Sometimes you got this much air space on the top of your food, which, this food up here, again, won't be unsafe, but it might be turn darker and stuff. So, but the way to avoid siphoning is to avoid quick temperature changes. So we're gonna put our hot applesauce into our hot water, and we're gonna water bath it. And then what I do is I just turn off my pan at the end of the time, take my lid off, and give it another 5 minutes in there so that it's not such a huge temperature differential when you take it out. So, but those are the only 2 risks really associated with applesauce, and they're not really food safety risks. Apples are a nice high acid food, and we're gonna add lemon juice to them as well, so it'll even be higher acid. And if you remember from our jam and jelly classes, the sugar helps preserve and hold color, but sugar is actually totally optional with applesauce too. So you'll see that I think they call for 1 3/4 to 2 1/2 cups of sugar, but then they say optional on the recipe. So you could do completely sugar-free applesauce.
Have you ever done it with stevia?
I'm sorry?
Have you ever done it with fake sugar?
I've never done it with stevia because I just don't like stevia, but you could, absolutely. And again, the sugar is going to hold your color a little longer. So in the jelly classes, I showed you some jelly that because I always do low sugar jellies, and mine have a tendency after about 8 months to get a little darker along the top border, which it's still fine to eat, but it's not as pretty of a gift anymore, you know? So the sugar is also going to help retain that pretty golden color. Or again, if you use red peels, sometimes people get a nice pink hue in here, and the sugar is just going to hold that longer. So the more you use, the better of a color and preservative it is, but it's also going to get really sweet. So, and I think they say that canned applesauce is going to taste sweeter than when you've got it hot in the pan and you're taste testing it. So make sure you go a little short of like your optimal sweetness, because it will get sweeter.
Can you put
I'm gonna
like cinnamon or something in it?
So I love cinnamon. Who asked that? Was it you? Okay. I love cinnamon in mine. You could also do cloves. You could do ginger. You could do nutmeg. But I always put cinnamon in mine. And I brought cinnamon. And again, if you remember, dry spices are just kind of an optional thing. They don't really impact safety or anything like that. Some of them accelerate. So you just, some of them like, certain things like I think dried oregano really gets big after canning. So you just want to, you know, but cinnamon is going to taste exactly the same to me. And this has a little bit of cinnamon in it, and I just put it in until it tasted good to me and then called it good and canned it. So you may or may not like it. I got to find I forgot to bring a stirrer. Huh. There we go. Guess I'll just use
How much
this.
sugar did you say? Because at the bottom, I think we got cut off. I don't think it's on there. Am I blind?
Your sugar.
It's on the top of the, oh no, it isn't, it's not at all.
No, it did, it got cut
That's
off.
lemon juice.
I can look it up on the website.
Is it? There's not a second. Oh, weird. Okay. Then you're missing a couple of things there. So this recipe, you've got the apples and then the fruit protector, and then it's 1 to 1.5 cups of water. And then it's 1 3/4 to 2 1/2 cups of sugar. And in parentheses, they've got optional, because you do not need to use any at all. That's my sand plum jelly. This is the recipe, but there's all ends right there. And then on the second page, mine says 3 tablespoons of lemon juice, but yours says that, right?
So what if you had like a bad spot, like on your apple? Can you just cut that bad spot out and still use the rest?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, just cut bad spots out. And okay, so let's talk about the ways to prepare your apples while we're just waiting for this to kind of cook down a little bit. So if you want to do applesauce that does not have any peel in it, there's a lot of ways to get there. One easy way, one time-consuming way, is to either use a peeler or a paring knife and just peel every apple, quarter them, take the little cores out, and cook down now your, like you were making apple pie. Just cook down your apple wedges or slices or whatever. There's also some, do any of you have a KitchenAid that has attachments on it? So there's a couple of attachments, although they're not cheap, but that would go on your KitchenAid. And one of them, it's a combination between it's a meat grinder and then a fruit and vegetable smasher, and you combine them. It's a big apparatus. It sticks out about this far, but you would take you could actually just quarter your apples with the peel and the core and everything in them, cook them down, cook them and get them kind of soupy, and then you just ladle it into the spigot on this front of your KitchenAid, and it runs it all through like a mill, and the apple pulp goes in one area, and then the apple waste, which would be the seeds, the cores, and the peels, goes off to another place. So you're just, and it just, you turn your KitchenAid on low, and it just keeps on going.
Was that the same device that we were asking you about, like for tomatoes, to make
Yes.
it faster?
Exactly
You
the
don't
same device,
Don't
yes.
have to peel the tomatoes even?
Nope, you don't have to peel the tomatoes either, yeah.
I bought a Johnny Apple Peeler store. I bought an apple peeler core on
Yes.
Amazon for $28.
Exactly. So you can get them. I think you can get them. You can get them that are electric or battery operated, and you can also just get a little manual hand crank.
Manual one.
So KitchenAid has another piece that's called a spiralizer that comes with a peeler add-on, and that's how I did this batch, where I just you stick the apple on a stem, and then it's got a little razor that just, it rotates around, and the apple spins, and it just takes the peel right off of it. That one I did have to, though, then go back through and do my core, take my cores out. I had to wedge, cut the apple and get the core out. So all those are ways that you could start in your pan with apples. I mean, what's going to be in your pan is exactly what's going to go into your canning jars. Just nice plain apples with the sugar and the lemon juice.
And did you say you do or do not have sugar in these? Did you put
These
sugar-
don't have any sugar in them yet.
The ones that you made here, do they have sugar in them?
No.
No.
No, I mean, the ones that, yeah.
Yes.
So on these, I use the lower amount. Is it 1 3/4 cups? I use the lower amount of
Yeah.
sugar. So you'll be able to taste that and see if that's the right sweetness for you, because you can go all the way down to 0, and you could add more than 2.5 cups too. But it's going to become a very, very, very sweet product. So,
I mean, that was one of the feedback I had on my 36 jars of jelly that I made, was they were very sweet. So
and
then
did you use the regular recipe or the low sugar?
I used the regular.
So
That was a lot of sugar. And so
I
then I
know.
made another batch of strawberry, because it was in the book that came with the machine.
Yes.
The low sugar one, and my husband's diabetic. So he liked that one. I mean, it was a lot better for him. And I could tell there was a little bit of a difference, but man, that other stuff was so sweet, you could, ugh.
to me, the flavor of the fruit comes out more the lower the sugar.
Yeah.
And you can get to the point where it's so non-sugar that it's not
Yeah.
very desserty tasting,
Yeah.
But the sugar really covers up the nice fruity taste. So I always make the low sugar recipes with my jam and jelly maker.
Okay, but then you also have to buy that low sugar pectin thing too, not the,
Oh,
there's-
and those reduced sugar recipes in the book are just regular pectin. But you can use low sugar, no sugar pectin. There's another brand called Pomona where you can use no sugar at all. But you have to follow the directions on those packages. Like the pectin that we use with the jam and jelly maker always goes in at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the other brands might have you bring your fruit all the way up to a boil and everything before you add the pectin. So you just want to follow the recipes, but you can still use your jam and jelly maker. So
Yeah, I actually ordered a book that this lady made, because there's a few recipes that come with the machine, but she has a book just for that machine. And, I mean, it's about that thick or whatever, so I ordered it. And it's got 100 different recipes in it.
called like small batch preserves or,
Using the
Yep.
Ball automatic jam and
yeah,
jelly.
I think there's one called Not Your Mama's Jam and Jelly or something. And then there's another called Small Batch Preserves. And they're both specifically for that machine. I just read that machine got discontinued.
No.
I know. I'm just
Well, they
like,
had about 20 of them at, whatever the new
True
name.
Value?
No, Orscheln's?
oh, seriously?
Yeah, they had them on,
Orscheln's.
Well, if you're dying to have one, buy it now because it's all on Facebook that,
It's got a different name.
Oh, yeah.
And it was on an end cap, because I was having a hard time finding the little jars. I finally found them at True Value, the little jars,
the 4-ounce jars.
and whatever, yeah, okay, 4 ounce. but they had an end cap, and they had, I want to say maybe 10 or 12 of those on an end cap. I thought they were 119. I thought it was like 119 or, and then they had, and there were, but they had a coupon for 10% off, I think. So I used
Yeah, I'm on a Facebook group called Ball Jam and Jelly Maker, and they're all like, "Yep, they're not making it anymore." And
That's
I have two of
crazy.
them because I love them so much. But I'm like, I hope they never break down or anything.
Wow,
So-
yeah, I mean, it's just so easy. Like, once you get that first stage done, I mean, you can go off and do all kinds of things, just standing there and doing all this stuff, and then tasting it, and putting it in water, and does it ball up? And I'm like, no.
That's what so many of the people that are on like that Facebook page say is you can even do different recipes. You just use that as your pot that stirs itself. You know, you can set the times differently. You can, but it just keeps you from just standing over the stove stirring
Yeah.
for 20 minutes, you know, like I'm doing over here.
Yeah.
But and some people in fact make applesauce in their jam and jelly maker, but I never have.
I
So
may have to try that.
they went.
I may have to try that.
I think it could be a really
How
good.
long are those gonna boil until they're?
These are only, these go, now right now, they're still all super firm and they're not even boiling yet, but I'm trying to not be, but they're gonna go until they're kind of soft and cooked. And then, in this case, now like this batch, I already had peeled and cored, so it was all good. And I just took a potato masher and went in and just mashed them. And it was pretty close to applesauce by the time I started mashing, with just a few lumps in them. This batch, because it's got the peels on it, they're gonna probably remain a little bit, I mean, those peels are gonna be loose in there. So we're gonna run them through the Vitamix and until you don't, and I used to make it, this applesauce for my daughter all the time. She absolutely loved it. And you could never tell that the peels were in there. So, but again, I think if you don't have a very high-powered blender, you might find that it's more textured than you want. But I can let everybody have a taste sample after I've zipped it so you can see if you would ever want to make them. It really shortens the applesauce making process if you don't take the peels off, of course. But this pan is basically just warming up. It's not doing anything interesting. The other thing that you'll find is depending on the variety of apples you use, they react very differently as you heat them up. Some, I think the Jonathans that I got from the Prairieland market, they just cooked right down into applesauce. But the Granny Smiths that I was using from Dillon's to kind of tart up the whole process were very hard. So they were the ones that needed to cook a little longer and be mashed. So
Do you think that was the difference between being local grown and store grown, or the variety of apple?
both. I think your locally grown apples are going to be always just better. Yeah. But you know, an apple that's not fully ripe is going to be much firmer, and there's certain varieties of apples. I think your galas, you know, I had the local galas, local Jonathans, and the Dillon's Granny Smith, and the Jonathans just went. The galas were kind of right in the middle, and then the Granny Smith stayed firm quite a bit longer. So, and Matt has given me apples before, but in the past he's given me several varieties. So this time he gave me all one variety, and he didn't remember what the name of the apple was. So we're just on potluck here. I tasted them the other day, and I thought they tasted quite good. And I was wishing a few more of them were red peeled, because that would give this applesauce a nice blushy color, but there's just not that much red in here.
If you really wanted them to color, you could always add a little food coloring.
You can always add a little food color. I do that with my jalapeno jellies. I like to give them away at Christmas, and so I'll do like red and orange and yellow peppers, but then add a drop of red food coloring, so they've got that Christmas red. And then for my green jalapenos, I do a drop of green I like a little green and yellow so that they're kind of a bright green. Otherwise, they go to sort of an evergreen. But we're softening up just a little bit here. Do you think we should eat? I think we should maybe eat while
Yeah,
we're...
I was gonna add, if you're talking about finding jars and that kind of stuff, I got all the jars and stuff for our stuff from Webstaurant, W-E-B, like restaurant, but Webstaurant. And their prices, Amazon doesn't even come close, or any of those places. The only killer is the shipping charge. You never get free shipping unless you're like a member and spend $1 billion. And even at the store, we buy a lot of our supplies through them. But that's where I got all the jars, and even with the shipping, it was better than any place else. But if you only need a handful, but I don't think they have a minimum.
I think probably your best values would be like Walmart. I get mine at Dillon's a lot just because that's where I go to the grocery store, and they have a tendency to. The bigger jars tend to be about $1 a jar. So if you get a dozen jars, it's between $10 and $12. I can't remember what the little half pints are. So everybody remembers too that you can always can in smaller jars than the recipe calls for, but never can in larger jars than the recipe calls for. This particular recipe calls for pint or quart jars and has the same processing time for both. So you can use pints. If you use if you like to open up a big jar at a time, you can also use quarts. I did notice, you know how many recipes call for applesauce? Just a little bit. And so some people can them in the little 8 ounce, the half pints, and some even use the little 4 ounce. But you still have to do them for the whole 20 minutes. And I've heard more reports of siphoning on the little 4 ounce one. There's just not enough room in the jar. So,
Now Walmart's got the big quart ones, almost stacked to the ceiling out there.
oh,
But
do they?
Yeah.
And do you remember how much they are?
I wasn't, it was like I saw them, but I was looking for the little ones like that. I can't remember. I think
Where?
at Walmart, they had them like in a,
The dollar store also.
oh, they do?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, and so are they, how much are they there?
I think they're like $8 or
Yeah.
something for a flat of them.
That's great.
yeah, they just had a big display out in the
And a lot of times, they
middle
give you that
aisle.
5
Now,
off
again, this was
25
like
coupon for
3
the
weeks
Saturday.
ago or,
So then if you go in and buy 2 boxes of them, then you get $5 off.
Ooh, I love
If
that.
you want during the week, then you get a $5 off $25
oh, yeah,
coupon.
on Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's at
Where's that? The dollar store?
yeah.
Dollar General?
Dollar General.
Yeah.
Dollar General. What I did is I had some friends mine in Arkansas, they knew I was doing this, and please don't shoot me when I say this, but in my age group, I'm having some friends that are dying. So one of my friends said, you know what, Sandy, so-and-so just passed away and the kids don't know what to do with these jars. So-and-so just passed away and they don't know what to do with these jars. And we're meeting them in Branson the first week of December. I said, well, just bring them with you.
I'll take the
So
jars.
they're like, great, because we've been trying to figure out where to get rid of all these jars. So I, quote, inherited a bunch of jars.
Oh,
from
that's great.
some friends' family.
And you know that, we'll talk about this a little bit more too, but in the 2-part lid, you can use the rings over and over again as long as they don't get too rusty. Because the rusty, I think, impacts their ability to, they've got to kind of hold this flat lid down without holding it too tight. So you want there to be some, in fact, if you probably already noticed that when you take your cans out of the canner, this ring is almost always kind of loose.
It is, I'm like,
Yeah, that's because it was letting that oxygen out. So
and I thought,
that's
I know I
the,
twisted that, not too tight.
yep. So as long as you, as your rings are not rusty, feel free to reuse your rings. But don't ever reuse your actual flat lids for canning. You can use them if you're just storing things that are not canned, but don't ever use them again for canning. I always use one of those church key, the little pointer, and so I can always tell that my jar was used for canning before. Whoops.
Oh, sorry, dear.
Sorry, I'm just in a, not small enough to make my way through
Oh,
these
you are.
chairs. Oh, you got some weird spoons here. There we go.
I'm sorry, I should have gotten you. Sitting here comparing all of the They're-
Prices?
okay, Walmart was $12.97, Ace Hardware $11.99. This is for 12 pint jars with lids and everything. Target $10.99, Amazon $9.22.
Oh, my.
Okay, now my water is boiling and I have much more liquid because the apples are starting to give some juice. So I feel like my threat of scorching is getting a lot lower. So I'm just going to keep that going. They're not terribly tender yet. So, and let me get a big spoon.
What can I help you with?
Do you want to, well, actually, do you want to start toasting some bread?
I would love to toast it.
Okay.
I don't know how a toaster works.
It just, you can throw two
Yeah, it's been a
in
while.
there and
I
then,
use a toaster oven.
Michael does that.
okay.
That looks like applesauce.
It looks a lot like applesauce. Did I tell you guys I used to can this for my daughter when she was in high school, and I would can it in like 8-ounce containers, and it would typically, she would do a container a day. So if I made eight jars in 8 days, it would all be gone. And I was like, why am I even bothering to can this stuff? I could just stick it in the refrigerator.
Oh, wow.
And again, if you like chunky, depending on the kind of apples you use, you could press them in such a way that your applesauce will be chunky. You could also use cinnamon, cloves, ginger.
You said you did put a little cinnamon in this?
These do have cinnamon, just my amount of cinnamon. You can't see it very well, can you? There we go. I give you I kind of shorted you.
And this one you use the 1 3/4 cup sugar, the low
Yes.
sugar?
Yes. What do you think about sweetness
Oh,
level?
I think I love it. I think if it's any sweeter, but again, I'm not a sweet person.
If it was any sweeter, you wouldn't like it?
Yeah. Isn't that good?
I love it, yeah. But that's why I always like to put a nice tangy apple in there, so it's not just all sweet apple mush, but
I was looking at the apple preserve recipe, trying to figure out how I could flip it to my little electric ball maker, you know.
I think you could do it just exactly, so it has pectin in it, right? Yeah. So
I would just kind of
do
follow
it,
the same methodology of,
yeah, put your apples and your thinly sliced lemon and your pectin lemon juice. And doesn't it call for some butter? Nope, it doesn't.
No.
I would put some butter
do
in
it
just
in
to
it.
keep, you don't do it?
oh, I put butter in everything.
Okay, yeah,
To
just
keep it from frothing or
to keep
whatever.
it from frothing.
See, I listened.
You did. And then add, the only thing you will want butter, because with 6 cups of apples, lemon, and 4 cups of sugar, your boil over factor is a little bit closer there with the jam and jelly maker. But so just keep your eye on it.
What happened?
Oh, did it cook all the way? Oh, I think it could go a little bit longer, but.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let's get a plate. I'm thinking we'll just have to butter. I like caramel apple jam with some butter on it. I'm one of those super decadent people that,
Is there anybody who doesn't want butter? Look at that, what a good room. Julia Child, everything's better with butter.
I can see what you're saying though, Katie, about that caramel apple jam sugar caramelization process. Oh dear Lord.
if you've ever made flan and things
Yes,
like that,
yeah.
they do that where they caramelize the sugar. But that was something I had never done before, and it was a very painful. And by the time it got done, I had the smell of so much burnt sugar in my nose that the third batch I was like, I don't think I burned it, but did I? And so I made several people taste it and tell me like, this isn't burnt, is it? Oh, sorry, to cancel you just go like that. And then if you want just butter and then add a little,
So everybody gets one?
I don't know if you want to, it doesn't matter to me, but do you guys want a whole piece of toast? Debbie says, yes, bring it. Okay.
This is lunchtime, this is
Yeah.
not lunch.
Okay, so now I've got about more than half full of liquid. The apples are getting tender and yellow. And the water is boiling pretty vigorously, but I'm only getting the first few apples that are starting to kind of move away from the peel.
And you had water in that pan when you put those apples in there, or no?
I drained the apples from the Fruit Fresh water. Oh, they
Yeah.
are starting to get a little tender now. I drained the apples from the Fruit Fresh, put them in here, and then I put the 1.5 cups of water that the recipe called for 1 to 1.5. I felt like I might need a 1.5 because of how many. This pan is super full, so I just wanted to make sure.
Spoon that on top?
Huh?
Just spoon that on top? Is that what I'm doing
Just
there?
yeah.
You show me what to do.
Just give it a little rub with your knife. Aren't you a toast girl?
Amazingly not, I'm not a big bread person.
Oh,
I mean, I do have toast, but I use a toaster oven.
okay.
So you're saying you're bougie?
Yeah.
I just,
I'm just
you know, I
kidding.
have these friends that are like, oh, too much bread, and I'm like, oh.
Let's just use new plates and we'll wash these afterwards because I didn't think my way through all these little dishes.
When you sit up front, you get all the good things.
Okay, so I wanna ask a question about the meat grinder, so like, are you cooking the tomatoes, or like, if you had peaches first, are you cutting them and cooking them, and then putting them through that, or are you doing them whole cooking? Or you're not even trying to get the skins off, right? So you're just putting, like, the fresh fruit just right in it? Whether
Yes.
it's an apple or a tomato?
Okay, so if it was an apple or a peach well, peach, obviously you have to take the pit out because
Right.
that's not going to run through that meat grinder. But an apple or a pear, that's going to pull off the skin and the seeds and stuff so that you'll get a puree
Right.
when you use that piece of equipment off your KitchenAid. If you do tomatoes, I do that when I want tomato juice.
Okay.
Now, you could then cook your tomato juice all the way down to be a nice sauce, but it's not going to be like crushed tomatoes or diced tomatoes. If you want diced tomatoes, the way you're going to do that is you're going to blanch your tomatoes,
Okay.
pull and then
Then quarter them up.
chop them up and cook them a little bit and do it that way. So,
But like peaches or pears or apples, you're doing them not cooked. Is that right?
no, you do them cooked.
Do them cooked?
Yeah.
run it- So cook them and then run it through.
Yes,
Okay.
to run your stuff through the KitchenAid, there is a meat grinder portion of that, so I'm not talking about meat, but for fruits and vegetables, you would always want them to be soft and cooked, and you're gonna get an applesauce textured product at the end of that,
Okay.
not a lumpy product, so, yeah. But I do a lot of tomato juice with tomatoes, and it's just a perfect way to do tomato juice. But the other thing, I think we've talked about this before too. I think it's called a chinois. Have you guys seen these where it's 4 legs and then it's a cone-shaped colander, and it usually comes with sort of a cone, diagonally cone-shaped wooden piece. And that is another way, if you cooked your apples and you still had the seeds and the peels and all that in there, you would just
It's like a
put that.
sieve type of thing.
Yeah, it's a sieve. You would put that over the top of a bowl and then dump your apples in there and then crank that wooden piece around. Those things are like 10, 12 bucks. In fact, I just sold one at a yard sale because I realized I never used it anymore. But they're very inexpensive, and you could do the same thing with your tomatoes like that too, where you just sieve around the seeds and the peels stay inside the chinois, or however you say it. It's chinois, and then the juice goes into your bowl. So that's another way of doing that. There's a lot of ways to get to this point. Oh, now it's almost completely full of water. These are not going to need to go very much longer, especially since we have the Vitamix. We don't have to get them all the way down to mush before we puree. And these are definitely not the apples like I described the Jonathans. They're staying pretty well intact. Ooh, that's very hot. So again, we're just gonna, I guess I'm gonna need another pan. No, I'll use this.
And this was the caramel, right? This is the
This
caramel.
one is the caramel apple jam, which I think is best on toast. Do you like it?
Mm.
What do you do? What do you do? Trying to not eat so much bread?
Yeah.
Good for you. That's a low carb piece of toast, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's super good. So does the caramel mix into the apple then when you cook it?
Yeah, so that recipe, oh, you guys have it, but I don't. So it had you, again, I peeled the apples, and I used Granny Smith for this because I really wanted a nice, tangy, fruity apple. So I peeled the apples, and then I cooked them, and then I mashed them, or you could use your food sieve or your food mill. And so now you've got applesauce sitting over here. Then that granulated sugar process where you caramelize the sugar and you just heat it over medium-high heat until the sugar begins to melt. That was another thing that I learned, is you kind of need to do this.
Well, it says not to stir it. It says
Yeah.
shake the pan.
When you stir it, you lift up some of those melting sugar crystals, and then now you've got to remelt those again because they kind of solidify in a different form. So, and then when the sugar gets all melted, you remove it from heat, and then you add the remaining 3/4 cup of water, which I did boiling hot water. After I had left that melted sugar for about 5 minutes, just sit on the cool burner, and then the sugar will still seize up a little bit. It becomes like hard candy kind of, and so you just stir that over low heat again until it all goes back to homogeneous, all mixed in, and then you add the apple pulp and the brown sugar. And I added my brown sugar first, and it did not spatter or get crazy. And then I was off the heat by this time, and I put the apple pulp in there, and then it didn't either. So it all just mixed in really nicely. And then you cook it until everything gets dissolved, stirring constantly, increase heat to medium-high, and then boil it for 10 minutes. And then you put it into the canning jars and do a water bath.
What if you were to use caramel sauce? What if you were to just squirt caramel sauce? And
Well,
that's it?
so what I'd be a little uncomfortable with that because I don't know what the pH of that caramel sauce would do to my jam. Would it still be a high acid food? So what I would probably do, and there are many caramel apple recipes out there, I would probably look for another recipe that called for something a little bit different so that I didn't have to caramelize the sugar, but I still knew I was using a safe recipe. Okay, I'm thinking this is about, wow, they're remaining quite firm.
You're becoming quite the toast professional.
Like I said, I make it in my toaster oven, I just like, whip the thing.
And it's done.
How does this work? How do I didn't know they had regular toasters anymore. I can also make pizza in my toaster oven.
Yeah. You can do more things in your toaster. you don't, right?
Okay. I'm kind of mashing these down a little bit with the back of my spoon to test how firm they are, and I think I'm just going to give them a couple more minutes to go before we... Okay, so my favorite, I've saved the best for last, at least in my opinion. This last one is an apple lemon preserves, and it was super easy to make, and it has nutmeg in it, and it has quite a bit of nutmeg. And even the directions said some people don't love nutmeg. I love nutmeg. So I actually added half the nutmeg, tasted it, and then thought, nope, more would be better. So then I added all the nutmeg it called for. But in the recipe, it actually says some people may not love nutmeg, so use cinnamon, use whatever. So you'll have to see what you think about this, and to me, it perfectly pairs with the cream cheese. So it's just autumn on a spoon.
So I hear you ran into my son at the country club?
I did. I told him I'd been hanging out with his
Yeah,
mom, and
yeah.
he was like, what?
Yeah.
I wonder if,
It makes him very nervous.
I don't know if for you to know me or me to know you. It could be either.
Could be, but I probably, because you're like, what did she say? You know.
I
To
told
you.
him that you were making jelly, and he was like, what? And then Pam was like, you haven't seen any of her pictures? She got into her phone and was showing him all the jelly you were making.
I gave him one with the cherry. He said it was sweet, and what I didn't do well the first batch was to make sure those cherries were small. And so when he opened the jar and spread it, he'd get like almost
big old hunk of-
cherry. So that
Yep.
was his feedback, and I'm like, no, I appreciate that feedback. So then when I made another batch, I made sure they were smaller. Not only that, but everything was smaller. Strawberries were smaller. I like a big chunkiness.
I know, I do
But a
too.
lot of people don't. He just wanted to spread it like I don't know.
So one thing you can do with jam, they say if you just like puree with your blender, that you can kind of mess with the pectin a little bit. But you could take your food processor or your blender and just kind of pulse it a little bit and just break up that fruit a little bit more, or you can cut it finer. But there's a kind of a happy medium for how many chunks of fruit you want and how much gel you want.
So this is my other full disclosure, because I went online and they're like, this lady said, I know there's purists out there and they go buy fresh strawberries and they go buy fresh cherries and they go buy. I don't, she says, I buy frozen. I made almost all of mine with frozen fruit.
Nice, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
So- And it was, I'm trying to remember if I did the pineapple or if that was, I can't remember. But the pineapple may have been fresh, like in the, I wasn't about to cut that thing. And so, you can buy them already all cut. But everything else, the cherries, mixed berries, the strawberry, everything was frozen, and you can buy organic stuff.
Well, and those frozen foods, they're frozen at the point of peak ripeness. They're flash frozen, so they don't lose much in terms of quality or anything. The only thing, like I've been online where some people are like, yeah, I made peach jam from canned peaches, and to me
No.
that's just wrong, because now they have lost their quality, and so but I oftentimes freeze fruit when the harvest is there. I don't have time to do my canning, so I freeze it myself, rhubarb and things like that, and then I can can through the winter with the fruit that I froze. So how is it?
Any different?
Probably
Yeah.
what the manufacturers froze is probably higher quality than what I'm doing. Okay, let me show you this. For time purposes and because we're going in the blender, I'm not really going to town with this. You can see some of the peels are starting to attach. At home, if I were making this, I would probably go a little bit longer. But again, we're gonna buzz this all in the Vitamix and you're not gonna really notice. But normally, like when I made this, my applesauce looked like applesauce, and only required a couple of mashes with the potato masher. And all we boiled the fruit, and I'm gonna just kind of pop this lid because hot stuff likes to expand. And I've got my thing down on the lowest one. See how much like applesauce that's starting to look?
Wow, that thing got some power.
Vitamixes are so powerful that you can
It's
put
quiet.
butter, milk, and flour in there and make a warm cream sauce, a thickened cream sauce.
I made hollandaise sauce in mine.
The what?
Hollandaise sauce?
Hollandaise sauce.
Yes, hollandaise. You can do a pureed soup and take it from the raw ingredients to a hot soup in this Vitamix. But it's a pretty expensive thing. Ninjas, I do a lot the same, but they're not as expensive.
You can
I'm just gonna look in here and make sure that it's,
My Ninja, you can make the soup in the Ninja. It's got the.
yeah, so same thing.
you can get
Oh my gosh, this is so beautiful.
you can get one that's refurbed too from Vitamix.
Yes, exactly. My first one was a refurbish. So look how pretty that is. Like you can never tell that there's peel in there.
Well, you can't even see the peel.
Huh?
Can't even see the peel.
No. And I think it's a little healthier because it's got the peel in there. You know, it's going to have some fiber in it and things like that that wouldn't be there. I did notice so I think I told you I haunt some Facebook canning communities, and one that's really, really strict where everybody's like, don't nothing except tested recipes, you know. And but some of them are like, you should never leave the peels on because of food safety with the peels. But I did a lot of research because I thought I shouldn't bring this to my class unless I know it's safe. And even Ball leaves it up to you whether or not you take the peel off or not. So I feel good about using the peel, but make sure you wash your apples first. And especially if you're buying store-bought apples, because there's probably some wax on there.
Wow, some of those little babies are expensive.
Yeah, they are. Vitamix is and I remember my brother had one and told me about it, loved it, loved it, loved it. He actually bought me my first one because I had done something nice for him or something. And, but I thought I'll never get enough value out of that expensive machine. And I have used it so much. This is my second one because they last forever too.
Are you trying to drain some of the water off as you do it, or you're just putting it all in?
No, I'm going to put all the water in it.
Okay.
Whatever doesn't come in my scoop, it's going to go, I'm going to dump in there. I think I might be able to get all the rest of this in there. Because there's not really, I mean, some of the water obviously already went in, but there's not that much juice left.
If you go someplace that makes like smoothies or like those acai bowls, they always have the commercial Vitamix.
I mean, that little jewel right there is
So-
$589.
Yeah, they're expensive.
Now, if you buy them refurbished, also this is the only reason that I finally traded my refurbished one in was because it was super tall and it doesn't fit under the counter. And I wanted a low profile one, so I got this one. So I finally upgraded. But I mean, this thing it's probably 10 years old. I mean, I've had it for a long time and I use it a lot. Oh, I forgot to bring my little It has a little, which I forgot to bring, but it has a little stopper. If you get too thick, you can tamp it down and it stops. It's meant to go in here and it stops before it hits the blade. So you never blade up. I think we've got it. Again, look at that beautiful.
Wow. And you didn't even peel those.
What's that?
Well, we were just talking about mine doesn't fit under my cabinet either, but my house was built like in the 50s, and I think my counter, their original cabinets, I think they're setting lower maybe than like what this is. Just looking, because it would fit under these counters for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the height of uppers
Yeah.
changes, like what's fashionable changes through the years.
Just need cabinets from Crestwood County.
Yeah.
Here we are in the right place. Okay, so is anybody interested to taste this? We don't have any sugar in it yet or cinnamon or anything. If you want to wait until it's got, you would like to taste it? Okay.
Because I'm just curious, like, do you have to add some sugar to preserve it?
None at all.
So,
We're going to have to do a lot of dishes. Dang, I think it only needs maybe, let me give you a clean spoon. I think it only needs cinnamon.
You want to just dish it out on my plate?
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay.
Yeah, everybody should have.
Oh,
my plate though.
oh, that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, do you want to try one? Yeah. Just put 2 blobs and we'll both try it.
Did you want it on the bread? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Did I?
I took away everybody's spoons.
No, I still have mine.
What did we do with your plate?
I don't know.
Well, she didn't.
Oh, she didn't eat the toast. She gave it to
She's
somebody
leaving
behind her.
Oh, okay. Do you want some more? Do you want to try this? What do you guys think of it? Does anybody else want to try it?
I see what you're saying. It's good, but it may be just a,
It's a little flat, isn't it?
I didn't know this was still happening.
but I think if you added cinnamon to this, what do you think, Donna? Do you think it?
I think a little sugar would brighten up the flavor. Remember, we're going to put lemon juice in it too.
Thank you.
Let me come up
I'm
there.
just amazed at how
I
they're,
can bring them down.
I can't feel the peel.
The peel is gone, isn't it?
That's the amazing thing. I mean,
Yeah. I was trying to look and see if I could find how much the Vitamix, like a refurb was.
yeah, because there was I looked up that 7,500, you know, the model that she's got, and
Yeah,
it's
I-
589.
I got one for my.
Wow, that's gone up a lot since I bought mine.
Well,
Now,
we
they
were
have
having
other-
that discussion about
What was
the
it,
jam
Donna?
and jelly maker.
Yeah.
When you're like, oh, it's about, and I looked it up, I'm like,
No, it was the ball, the water bath.
yeah.
The- Which,
Electric.
honestly, like, look what I brought today. We're not even using the water bath canner. But,
Yeah, I just use a big.
so
pot.
keep in mind, we're going to add some lemon juice to this
Okay.
to properly acidify it. Now again, you're going to want to watch for scorching because now we don't have all that nice water in the bottom. And we're just going to really add our ingredients and bring it back up to hot. So how many of you would vote no sugar at all at this point to keep it healthier? Would you? Wow, lots of you.
But some cinnamon and lemon?
But you would do cinnamon, right?
Yeah. I'd probably add like a half a cup of sugar.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. And remember that you always want to, they always tell you to use bottled lemon juice because it's more reliably acidic than if you just buy lemons from the grocery store. Not sure why that is, but that's what I've always heard.
And even though you had a few more apples in there than the recipe called for, you're still using 3
No, I
tablespoons?
started out with 8 pounds, which was right kind of in the middle of that range.
Oh, I see, 7.5 to 10.5.
Yep, yep. Okay, so we've got that, and we're gonna do you wanna do no sugar? Let's do no sugar. Come on, let's live large.
Can we split the difference? I'm just kidding.
Some of it with sugar and some of it
No.
not? Oh,
I mean, you're taking this home, so,
it is kind of, I would like to. Okay, and again, I'm just gonna add, do you want me to measure the cinnamon? Do you care?
Just measure it with your.
I'm just gonna
little sprinkle.
eyeball it. Oh, it smells so good. It looks so pretty. We're gonna run the Crestwood kitchen out of spoons here. Needs a little bit more. I think it's really good. It's tangy. It's got that cinnamon. Okay, this is your class. Is there anybody that wants to taste it again before we can?
Oh, see what it.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
we're just going to warm it up and put it in the jars.
now that it has just the cinnamon and the lemon, I mean, I'll take a bite of it to see. Again, I'm trying to figure out sugar-wise, if I would put like maybe a half a cup in there, or, you know,
Yeah, I think left to my own devices, I would probably put a little bit of sugar in here,
Yeah.
but I'm totally cool with, anybody that would not want to do that. I get it. It's much healthier. Anybody else?
well, you can smell it.
Can't you smell the cinnamon?
So pretty. Thank you.
Another thing, keep in mind, if you're like I was 10 years ago with a child at home that can run through this a cup a day, you don't even have to worry about canning it. Just stick it in the fridge.
Yeah.
Sugar, no sugar?
I would know sugar.
Well,
But that's just me.
What do you think?
that's good. That or I'm hungry.
I still think a little bit of sugar.
You would like a little sugar?
I would say, I would probably put a half a cup of sugar.
I think the sugar would give it, there's a flatness to it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. I would put sugar in it, but.
I don't know
All
that
right.
I put the whole 2 3/4
Oh,
cup.
no,
or
me
what-
neither.
Yeah.
maybe
Okay,
a-
let's do a half cup.
Okay.
But again, while you're standing at the kitchen stove, you can make all these decisions because the whole sugar thing is optional and the cinnamon and nutmeg and spice thing is optional. So the only thing that is not optional is the lemon juice. So everything else is really within your, how lumpy you want it, how pureed you want it, using the peels or not. There's a half cup going in. All of that is completely, this can be your personal dish. I think, I've never done it this way, but I think it would be fun now to try it with the nutmeg or
Pumpkin
cloves
spice,
or,
And it says something about pumpkin pie spice. Oh, no, that's for the apple preserves. Never mind.
okay, we're just gonna let this warm up. Do you wanna hand out the apple preserves with the crackers? And some, I didn't bring
don't
any,
need
oh,
another
you don't
plate.
care about,
I have mine.
I think you're just gonna have to scoop and drop with some crackers. Because we're out of plates.
You're boiling.
Oh,
Exploding.
oh my goodness. Katie, don't walk away from the stove. Woo. Sorry, Crestwood.
Yeah, I got all kinds of plates. So you just drop some on there and, Yeah, I knew that was coming, so I didn't let you take my plate.
Okay. That is a good reminder that now is not a good time to walk away from the stove. Once you've got it all nice and thick, and you kind of want to just keep on stirring it, because otherwise it's just going to plop at you.
Is this what you would use the jam
I got it figured out.
maker? You were gonna use the jam maker?
Put it on a serving plate.
I think-
Yeah,
Could you use the jam maker from the very beginning, you think, or just at this point?
The jam maker. If I was definitely going to do all my peeling and coring first, I wouldn't leave any peels and cores on for the jam maker. And I think I would do the applesauce. No, I would do because there's no need, you just have to heat it here.
Yeah.
You're not really cooking it. So I would do it from the beginning. And then probably remove the stirring paddle and then mash it with a potato masher.
oh, you're saying use the jam maker to make applesauce with? Huh.
Yes, I've heard people say they have done it. I have never,
I mean, this seems so easy. I mean,
yeah, that's why I haven't. It's just a piece of equipment that I don't have to get out.
I just don't know if my blender or my Ninja, well, my Ninja might,
Would you like two to try?
I don't know if my Ninja would be as good as it, but I mean, I make tomato soup in mine because it crushes the
I think a
tomato.
Ninja would be as good. I think it would be plenty good enough.
Because it crushes the tomato and makes hot tomato soup in the
Yeah,
Ninja.
exactly. It would be good enough. So, as you recall from before, so we always want, in the canning world, we want everything to be super, super clean. So, Vicki washed all the canning jars, whether they're new or if you just have them sitting on your shelf for a while. You want to make sure that you get them all clean with soapy water. And then we put the jars into simmer in hot water, and we keep them hot. And again, you could start this at any point you wanted to. The reason you're smelling a little vinegar is because the water here is pretty hard, and the vinegar keeps it from etching your canning jars. But you want to have hot jars and put hot food into them, and then put it back into a boiling water bath so everything stays really, really hot.
So how do you keep your jars hot then?
What's that?
How do you keep your jars hot?
I just leave them in my water bath the
Oh.
whole time. Now you could also put them in the dishwasher. You just got to time that dishwasher thing so that, when you're ready for the dishes, the dishwasher is done and the jars are really hot.
But didn't somebody say that some dishwashers have a setting for that?
For canning jars?
Yeah.
I don't
mentioned that in one of
know.
the classes.
Hey, will somebody check the recipe and remind me what the headspace is?
Wow, I'm still trying to find. Oh, half inch, yeah. Half inch?
Half inch, okay. So headspace is critically important in all canning. Headspace is the room between the top of your food and the top of the jar.
It's all gone.
And
Oopsies.
every recipe has been tested to make sure that during the processing time, what you're doing is you've got it in this hot water bath, and during the processing time, you want to push out through heat all of the oxygen that is on the top of that jar, and push it out so it has a vacuum seal. So if you do not leave enough headspace, you won't get the vacuum that you need, and if you leave too much headspace, you may also, I think too much headspace becomes a much more serious food safety issue. So you really want to pay attention. And I'm just getting an approximate right now. But you want to pay attention to always make sure you know what the headspace is called for in your recipes.
Have you done a cost comparison that if you had purchased, whatever, 5 jars of applesauce versus what it cost you to make 5 jars of applesauce?
You know,
Or is it not about a cost, it's about you knowing that there's how it's made and the preservatives and that sort of thing? Is that?
my general rule of thumb, Sandy, is that if I can buy something that's every bit as good as I can grow it or can it, I'm just gonna buy it. But like, I can't buy a tomato unless I go to Prairieland Market. Can't go to Dillon's and buy a good tomato, right? And so, but that's my normal thing. Is I'm not. Although, like my brother gave me all these apples, so what have I got into this for cost? A little bit of fruit fresh, a half cup of sugar, a couple of sprinkles of cinnamon, and some lemon juice. So, I mean, this cost me nothing, you know? Okay. I've got a little bit left, but before I top off, I'm going to show you. So this is a dual function tool that's really important in canning. So this side is used to go down into the jar and sort of go along the edges and just make sure there's no air bubbles. Because if you had an air bubble in the middle of all this food, instead of having the required head space, you might have twice as much head space. So we're just going around and making sure this is pretty pourable, so I'm not that concerned with it. But in canned tomatoes and salsa and all of that, just anything, it's always a good habit to make sure that you don't have any additional head space more than you need. The other side of this tool, and I'm just going to use my other one so I don't have to rinse it, is a headspace measuring tool. So each one of these notches is a 1/4 inch. A lot of jams and jellies call for a 1/4 inch of headspace at the top of the jar. The second one is 1/2 inch, and it goes up to 1 full inch. So basically all you're going to do, we know we want a 1/2 inch, so I put it on the 1/2 inch notch, and you can see that I'm a good 1/4+ inch away from the headspace that I need in all these jars. So I'm just going to add applesauce to all of them. And hopefully try not to spill on the rim. I think this is interesting. I'm only getting 5 jars out of this despite the larger starting weight of my apples than the last time, but I think it's because the Vitamix.
Well, we took some, remember we ate some out.
Oh, we ate a bunch. You're right. Okay, I forgot about that.
What? I have to count those calories? No, you didn't eat anything.
Yeah, if you have it before it gets canned, it doesn't.
It doesn't count.
Okay, let me keep going. Well, that's probably the reason. That was dumb of me. I completely forgot about us eating. But I also thought the Vitamix might have compacted it a little bit more, you know. These seem to have a little bit more air in them. So let me I still think I need a little bit more. Oh, that one's looking really good. If you have, that. Okay, I feel like a couple of these are a little too full. And I'll show you at the end of this, there's going to be some leftover applesauce. If you have leftover, because you won't be able to make the proper head space, don't can them. Just put it in a jar and stick it in your refrigerator.
So if you don't process the jar like in the boiling, like in the bath water, can you, and you use it, you put it in the fridge, the lid, can you still reuse that lid then later?
Yes.
Okay.
If you did not use it for canning, you can use it. It's just once it's been in that hot water bath, you don't want to reuse it. Okay, so next thing, again, keeping our work area nice and clean. Just go around the tops of all these jars and make sure you don't want any food between the lid and the jar. So make sure you get always nice and clean. In fact, in pressure canning, I oftentimes do a paper towel with white vinegar on it because it not only cleans the jar, but it kind of de-oils the jar, you know. Now, if any of you have ever, canned 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, we used to always boil these too, and now Ball has changed their formulation. And while they say you can simmer them, that you do not need to boil them, and you can just wash them in soapy water and then use them at room temperature. So the other thing I want to talk to you about is this notion of fingertip tight. So again, we want this vacuum to be created by air escaping from these jars while they're in the water bath. So when you're cranking your jar shut, you do not want it to be uber tight. So they call it fingertip tight, which is just what you can get with your fingertips without really torquing it. So we're just going with a nice little short tweak there. You want it somebody said, as a matter of fact, they go until the jar wants to move on the towel. I do just a smidge tighter than that. That's moving, but I want it just one more crank. Okay, so now we've got our applesauce, 5 jars ready to go. And those of you who have been at some of the previous classes with me know that generally all water bath instructions, all canning instructions will start out, they will give you processing times for sea level. So depending on your altitude here, how many feet above sea level you are, you're going to add time to that because water boils at slightly higher temperatures, so we need to go more time. Slightly lower temperatures, so we need to go more time. In Salina, Kansas, we are at 1,200 feet above sea level, so you're always going to add 5 minutes to whatever the processing time is on your recipe. And that applies whether it's pints or quarts or the hot solid pan bottom. And therefore right on the heat. So I've got a little metal rack down there, and then you want to have enough water that when you get all of your cans dropped in there, that the water will cover your cans by at least 1 inch. So we've got a good 2 to 3 inches here. Does anybody want to come and look at this before we put the lid on?
So you had your jars in there, and it's okay if there's water in them. Are you drying them out?
Nope, you don't dry them out. Just, in fact, they're so hot that when you drain them, they're going to be pretty dry just from the heat. So I do make sure I dump them all as I'm pulling them out of the canner. You might need a little bump up. There we go. See how there's a little metal rack down in there? Okay. All right, so now remember, we do not start the timing until the water starts boiling. So I'm going to just crank this, help it come up to temp, but not close it all the way down. I've still got a little bit more applesauce in here, which almost not really even enough to create a refrigerator. If left to my own devices at home, I would just eat this right now.
Well, we can help you.
You could actually, you could just, yeah, you can have it. Okay, this is starting to boil now, so does somebody want to set a timer for 25 minutes? So if you're working on an approved recipe and it calls for a little bit of butter, but generally speaking, you cannot can any dairy products, cheese, butter, milk. You cannot can flour or cornstarch. So like say you wanted to do a beef stew, a thick beef stew, the way they typically tell you to can that is to do your beef and your vegetables, but then when you get it out of the can to heat it up, that's when you add your
Thickening agent.
to it. Yes, exactly. There are some approved recipes. There's a product called Clear Gel, and it will thicken food, and it's approved for canning things like pie filling, but it's not approved for canning things like beef stew. So, and I've read that it can change the flavors of things, so just know that. You also can't, obviously you can't do noodles or rice, any kind of pasta or rice. So again, if you were gonna make a chicken noodle soup, you would can all of your ingredients and then pour them in the pan and add your noodles to that. And I think that covers all the big stuff. There are things that you cannot can in a water bath that you can pressure can, and that's basically all your low acid foods. Meats, most vegetables, you cannot put in a water bath unless you pickle them, vinegar them. Meat you can never put in a water bath. So do we have the reference sheet in there for sites that I like to use? Because those of you have been, yeah, this one. This sheet right here is a great place to go look. Always feel, there's a lot of like rebel canning out there. So people can butter, which I find to be a very weird thing to do. But there's rebel canning groups out there that are like, anything can go, my kitchen, my rules. But I just don't subscribe to that stuff. So what I tell people is all of these are really safe, tried and true. That there's a National Center for Home Preservation that's on there. All your state extension offices and state university extension offices are only going to feature tested recipes. Ball is a really good one. Bernardin is a really good source, and you can find so many of these recipes online. So I wouldn't go to any place that you don't have a real strong level of trust with, because you don't want to can something. There is risk of death with canning because of botulism and food poisoning. So I just always like to stay in a very safe zone and know my food is being canned appropriately so that I can share it with other people. Those of you who have been at other classes, I think I told you that even 10 years ago, I was still canning more acidic products like canned tomatoes and fruit and stuff like that without even putting it in a water bath. And I've since learned that it's called open kettle canning, and it's not considered to be safe. But I've got brothers that still open kettle can, and we just agree to disagree, because I just don't think that's good, safe food anymore. So, any other questions? What did you think of the apple preserves? Was it too nutmeggy? Did you like it?
Oh my God, I really didn't even taste a whole lot of nutmeg, or did I just,
You didn't taste the nutmeg?
do I have COVID? No, just kidding. Just kidding. I may have to have another bite just to see. I'm just kidding. I could taste it.
There's another bite over here.
I'm just
I
kidding.
thought it was really,
No, that's the
that's
caramel.
caramel apple. I thought it was really strong on the nutmeg, but in a delightful way.
Caramel apple would be good on top of ice cream.
Yes, caramel apple could be really good on like a piece of cheddar cheese too, like a
Or a
little,
graham
a
cracker.
cheese and a
These are all
cracker
great.
and a smear.
Custard.
Yes, yes.
Yes, so good.
I was gonna put this last bit of sugared applesauce on anybody's plate that wants something, that wants some.
I want to try that.
Yeah,
Cup of sugar.
I just want a little taste, because I know she wants to taste it with sugar back. there.
Okay.
I just think a half a cup's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
It's funny. You wanna try?
Tell me if you think it's better. I'm not,
We can share.
do you want, I'm just not able to get over there.
I'm anxious to see what you think.
I'll give you more than that.
Okay.
No, you don't want any more? Okay. Is there any discernible difference?
It's brighter.
A little brighter?
Do you, I mean.
That's what I think it is. Sugar adds a
Yeah,
little
but I think it's not as bland.
spark
I
to
like
it.
better.
Yeah, I like it better. I don't know that it's like huge, but it's definitely, there's just a little.
Well, and when you think
Yeah.
about it, that generated,
Yeah, that's.
that probably,
perfect.
without all the sampling, that probably would have made 6 pints. And if you have a cup of sugar and 6 pints of,
Yeah, that's.
I mean, you're talking minimal sugar,
But you only put a
really.
half a cup.
Yeah, we only put a half cup. I was
Yeah.
thinking I might, left to my own devices, I might have put 1 whole cup. But, but I'm justifying how little sugar that really comes
Yeah.
out to be per serving.
It is very good. Okay, now I gotta go buy a bunch of apples and,
Well, now is the time to buy apples and not too much, or get apples from friends that have apple trees, but I don't know how much longer, although apples stay for quite a while. And again, 10 years ago when I was making it for my daughter all the time, I only had Dillon's as a resource. So I bought all my apples from Dillon's and I just sort of mixed up
I think
which
Dallas
brands
are
to give
99
it
cents this
the what?
99 cents a pound.
Dylan,
Apples are 99 cents a pound. I think.
Oh, wow, yeah,
all
yeah.
different kinds or
I
just,
think just maybe the gala.
okay.
Maybe
And you
the
can
less
make it with just using one kind of apple. You didn't have to, you don't have to
No,
mix
you
it.
don't have to use it. A lot of recipes will recommend using more than one kind just to put some flavor complexity, but it's really, like, I love a Granny Smith apple. I love a Cosmic Crisp. Ooh, I would love to make applesauce out of Cosmic Crisp. So I'm just curious. I think this is going to be our last one of this season because obviously it's going to be 23 degrees tomorrow night. But are there other classes you guys would like to see, other things? And most specifically, I'm wondering how you would feel about some pressure canning classes. And knowing that the minimum you're going to spend for a pressure canner is probably about $125. So it's not a cheap, it doesn't start out being a cheap hobby. The Presto, like Sandy wants and like I just bought last year, right now is running on Amazon about $294.
But on Amazon Prime, because I'm a Prime member, I got it for half price.
Are you kidding?
I did. I got it.
She's the queen of the deals.
I am.
Oh my gosh.
I did, and I got it for $120 or something like that.
Well, and I
can't-
did see online on Amazon, there's a Nesco that is also widely considered a very reliable electric pressure canner, and it was only like $126. So let me, have any of you ever used a pressure cooker?
Yeah.
So a pressure cooker is a little thing on the stove. Pressure canners are the same thing, and so what the canning under pressure allows the temperatures to go between 240 degrees and 250 degrees. In water bath canning, you can only get that temperature to 212, the temperature of boiling water. So in pressure canning, and a lot of people, I have an All-American, which is a really nice brand, and it's a stovetop brand. And I gotta say, it just makes me a little nervous, even though I know it's silly, because you're supposed to get it set to where it ticks a couple times every minute, you know, where it's just, so you just gotta stay close to the
Yeah.
stove, you know, and make sure that it doesn't get too hot or too cold. And but the electric water bath canner is and don't buy a cooker, you have to buy a canner. It has to say pressure canner, but it's a relatively new invention. Some old school canners are saying, oh, I would never use one. But Vicki went to a canning class and the extension agent showed them an electric, and recommended it, yes. So, but anyway, and it's just a really, I mean, it's almost like a set it and forget it. It takes you through the whole step. My Presto has a little,
Are they stovetop or the Presto's a plug-in? Right?
it's a plug-in.
Okay.
And it just, to me, it just takes that.
The first, I haven't opened because it's supposed to be a Christmas gift, except I just ordered it for myself. And when I read the instructions, you can't just walk away at the very first. There's a 10-minute something or other. You have to wait for it to ding or do something, and then you hit the button, and then you can walk away, because then it sits there for an hour.
Yeah,
by
you
itself.
put like 3 quarts of water in it, and you put your jars in there, and you press the button, and it goes. You tell it how many minutes you're going to can when you start canning, and then you press the button, and it warms your jars for you. So then the whole time you're prepping, your jars are just sitting there warming, like what we did here, and then you fill your jars and put them in there. And they're not even all the way submerged in the water. Their water only comes up about halfway.
Oh, really?
And so you put your food in the jars, you put your jars in the canner, and then you turn it on, and it starts building pressure. So it's got to really heat. And then it'll tell you when it's time to put the weight on. And then you put the weight on, and then it's got to build up the pressure with the steam. And then as soon as it builds up enough pressure, it goes, okay, it's canning now. And so then you can walk away.
Yeah.
And in fact, you don't even have to be there when it finishes, because I usually leave my stuff in there for a while after. It's like meat in a pint jar. You have to can for 75 minutes. And then it's another like hour cool down process. So it's happening for a long time, but you could come back once it finishes canning. It's now shelf stable. What about other water bath recipes? Anybody interested in trying other, like we could do fruit next summer, like canned fruit, more jam and jelly, more anything with, we could do spaghetti sauce or
Because you said sauerkraut takes a long time. That's my
sauerkraut is a fermentation process. You can do real sauerkraut is fermented, and so that's a whole different process. We could do some fermenting classes, but I would have to get a little more well versed.
Yeah.
What's that?
Pickles.
Making pickles would be fun.
Doing pickles? Yeah. And so that is something that I don't have a lot of expertise in, but
We can figure it out.
I will get, you have to use, do you like cucumber pickles?
Yeah.
So you have to use cucumber pickles that are bred for making pickles with, pickling cucumbers. And in fact, my first fermentation experiment was with just a normal cucumber, and I fermented them, and they were all hollow in the inside. It was just like a cucumber peel with nothing inside. And I was like, okay, that's why you got to use a pickling cucumber.
Didn't know that.
But, you can can carrots, and you can can okra, you can can cauliflower.
What about beets? I mean, I love
Oh,
canned beets.
yes.
I mean, is that water bath or is that pressure?
So if you were going to make them without vinegar, so just like a canned beet, that's a pressure cooker. If you're going to make a pickled beet with vinegar, that's a water bath, because now you've turned it into a high acid food with the addition of vinegar. So you can pickle them with a water bath. You can pickle any vegetable with, any vegetable that can be pickled, you can pickle in a water bath because of the vinegar. But if you just want to make I want to put up some green beans for my shelf, you've got to pressure can that. But I also love knowing what local produce is out there. And that's oftentimes a Friday stop for me to run in and the mushrooms, if you're a mushroom fan, they have the craziest, most beautiful gourmet mushrooms there. And you just know what's fresh and what's there, if it's squash season or if they've got beets or whatever. So, which I think is a really good resource for if you're a canner. You know, you want to can food that has traveled as
Yeah.
short a distance as possible.
Do you make your own homemade mushroom soup? Because I love mushroom soup. Do you ever make your own homemade mushroom soup using those?
Yeah, I do. In fact, we do one at the market that's mushroom and wild rice, creamy mushroom and
Oh,
wild
yeah.
rice soup. So good.
And it's loaded with all these local mushrooms that are, you know, grown around here, so you just
Funky
can't
and
have
good.
that
It's
same
so
flavor.
popular. We adapted it because we like to do some things with meat, some things that are vegetarian, and some things that are vegan. And so this one we adapted from a Pheasants Forever recipe for pheasant wild rice soup, although we used local chicken instead of pheasant. And then we just doubled down on the mushrooms. And so it's a vegetarian version because it has cream in it. And I mean, it sells out every week that we make it. Even through the hot summer, I was like, why are we still making this creamy mushroom wild rice soup? And it just kept selling. So yeah, it's really good.
I would like fermented foods,
Yeah.
like kombucha or like the,
Sauerkraut?
yeah, sauerkraut or any of that. Or
So-
kimchi, is it
Should be
kimchi?
right.
Do you make these or do you want to know how
I want to
to?
know how.
So I got a little fermentation kit and I have been playing around with it. The thing that you need is you need some space in your house where you can put it to about 60 between 50 and 60 degrees. So if you have to have a cool spot, or I don't, is your crisper warmer or colder than the rest of your, because you might be able to stick it in the crisper, but, and then you need time. So I wonder if we could do it to where we brought, because you know it's just a mason jar, same kind of mason jars that you're using to can stuff, and the mason jar ring, you know, like this, but then there's a little
Like a weight?
there's a weight, so you weight so everything's down in the liquid, and then the kit that I have has got a little like silicone topper that does not allow oxygen to go into the fermentation thing, but it allows it to burp out as it's fermenting, so it can go, air can come out, but it can't go back in. And again, the only thing I ever tried to make out of it was the cucumbers, and I used the wrong cucumbers, but then you just go put it someplace cold and dark for, you know, and some of them you stir them every day, some of them you don't, but it might be kind of fun just to like together prepare some fermented stuff, and then everybody could take home their own jar and
Yeah.
baby it until it comes out as a fermented food. But the next thing I was going to try, because of the cucumber issue, was local carrots, fermenting local carrots.
Ooh.
And I think it sounds so good, but I just haven't done it yet. So,
Yeah, we started making kombucha our own, so,
do you love it?
yes.
I didn't even know what that was until you mentioned it the last time, so then I went to Dillon's and bought a bottle.
Did you?
Oh, I love it, and my granddaughter will just,
It's
she,
not that hard to make.
I don't know, so then I went out and Googled, and then I looked at it, I'm watching the clock here too, and I'm like, there's 97 steps to this thing. And.
Oh, wow,
so,
okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
but it
well-
would, but it kept, so I thought, you know, I'll just pay the $2.99.
And it's not like kefir, is it, where you have to keep building?
No, you do.
You have to
Yeah.
keep the mother alive?
Yeah,
Okay.
But we just started, we got big ones so that we could do the continuous brew. So you pull off the bottom and then we can make a sweet tea out of
Oh.
it. But like baking the flavors from your base, because you can do a second.
And then is
burner.
it pretty low carb?
It's lower, yeah, because it burns. most
Because
of
it's
it.
fermenting most of that sugar?
The only
Yeah.
thing I haven't figured out is the alcohol content. So there might be a little bit of alcohol content. I know, right? I'm like, ooh, am I on call? Yeah, shouldn't be.
That's funny. I love kombucha.
I don't think it's
And that's
that
the
hard.
all-purpose
do you?
flour,
I mean, it just, it's a little
Yeah,
time
it's-
consuming when you don't do the
It
continuous
has
brew.
enough water and it has to be.
But we just
bottled
started the
water, not-
continuous brew. Because you have to like dump everything out and keep some in your mother. And then, you know, pour the other ones in the jar, and then you make your tea.
Oh my,
You put that in and add water, and then you put the mother, and then you put the sweet tea mix.
and from a health standpoint, and I'm not big, so what is the big, what's the big
It's
deal
the
with it?
prebiotics or the
It's
probiotics?
probiotics.
It's
I
a
think.
probiotic?
Yeah,
It's so good for your gut.
yeah,
Because
For
I
gut
just started
health.
buying it at Dillon's.
So then if
yeah.
I.
You know,
And
that's-
it's expensive. It's like.
Yeah, $2.99 a little bottle,
Yeah.
you know? And then when you've got a great granddaughter who's 4 years old, sit there and drink it faster than you can, you know, because it's, you know, there's flavors and this,
Yeah.
that, and the other.
Yeah,
And I think, I mean, that can't hurt her.
Yeah, you can
know?
make it pretty cheap, right?
yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know, just like what.
But
it's-
did you
it's-
have to order your first mother, your,
Well, I got one from somebody here in town.
oh, gotcha.
So, yeah,
Is that the timer? Okay.
Just put like a towel over it.
A couple little helpful hints back on the whole canning topic is that your water bath times are dependent on the water boiling the entire time. So if your water ever stops boiling, you have to restart and start your clock over again. So don't ever let it not boil.
so it continues.
And then what I do to prevent the siphoning, which is the food eking out into the boiling water, is I just turn off my pan, take off my lid, and let it sit for another couple of minutes before I take the jars out of here. And that prevents you from having that temperature differential that can create the overflow. Even if you do have siphoning, they say as long as you still have at least liquid up half the jar height, so as long as the liquid is still coming to here, it's still safe to use if your seal was good. I should talk about seals for those of you that are new. Anytime you properly can food, this seal should be, you should not be able to get it off with your hands. You need to have it, the only way you should be able to get it off is like with a church key. And so if you ever have something where, like when the jars are cool enough to handle after I've taken them out of the water bath, you're supposed to leave them on the counter for 12 to 24 hours. And then you test, take the little ring off and make sure that you can't lodge this off. If you can, then go ahead and stick it in the refrigerator and eat it that way before it spoils. If at any point when you've got it shelf stable, the lid becomes loose, throw it away, because that meant that oxygen got in there and now it's spoiled food. But when you first get your canners out of the jar, here's a couple the canners out of the pan, you always want to use, you want to clamp down on the glass, not on this metal. Because if you buckle this metal, you might interfere with the seal here. So both into the boiling water canner and out, clamp on the glass. Don't tilt or do anything like that. Just put it straight down on a towel. The towel will keep the glass from shattering as you meet cold counter. And let it sit for 12 to 24 hours before you mess with it at all. One of the things that you'll often, almost every time when I get done canning, my lids are like this. And it feels really weird the first time you do it. But this one is nice and tight. It's that this one loosened up as the air was pushing out. So now you can just tighten it or not. A lot of people also remove this entirely and store their food like this, because then if they have anything that spoils, they'll see that this lid popped off. So I think they look prettier like this. So I just never serve them before I've tested to make sure that seal is tight.
So if you were twisting the cap off there and the lid popped off, then you would know it
You would
was
throw it
bad.
away. Yep.
Throw it away.
Mhm. Yeah, you should always have to use, you should never, unless you've got unusually strong fingernails and hands, you should never be able to remove one of these with your hands. So you're going to need a little church key kind of thing, and it should have that little sound when you open it. So
And it's funny because when I was making all the jelly, because you made some comment last time, like the sweetest sound is pop. pop. And it is. I was sitting there, they were making it, and I heard pop.
It's a very happy sound. Like I did it. It's sealed. So in fact, let's do that here. I'm going to take one of these out. I'm going to risk a little siphoning to get it out. So look at that pretty applesauce. And this has still got, I'm just sopping up some of the liquid here. You just don't want to mess with these because you never want to, oh, I forgot to show you the lid. So a canning jar lid that has never been used is going to have a little bubble. I'll show you a,
I put it back on the jars.
oh, here we go. A canning jar that has never been used to can. You see this little bubble in the middle? Can everybody see that? That's what it looks like. And typically, but not always, sometimes they will vacuum seal inside the can. But typically when you pull them first out of the canner, this one still has that nice little bubble. But at some point it's gonna pop. Sometimes you can hear it really well. Sometimes you don't hear them at all. Looks like nothing in here has vacuum sealed yet. But sometimes, especially when you're making jelly, you get all your jam or jelly out of the canner and all of a sudden your jars are like singing to you. Yeah. Pop, pop, pop. See, these are all, I would hate to have one siphon, but it actually would probably be a good thing so that I could show you. When it siphons, you'll notice later that you put all your jars on a towel, and you'll notice like the canning liquid, like in tomatoes, you'll have like some red tomato juice around your jar, and you know then that it's siphoned. But again, I would just make sure that those lids sealed. And if they didn't seal, then your siphoning was a problem and you just need to put it in the fridge. And if they did seal, then you're fine as long as you have a half a jar's worth of liquid left. But also know anything that didn't seal, I'm just doing these really lightly so I'm not putting any pressure on the little siphon, the little dot in the middle. Anything that siphons so that you have food sticking out on top of the liquid, there's a chance that that food will discolor a little bit. Again, it's not a safety issue, but it's kind of a appetizing issue. So you can still eat it, but I would probably eat anything that siphons sooner than I would eat all my pretty stuff, because your pretty stuff's going to look better longer. But as long as it's safely canned and the lid is on firmly, it's not a safety issue. And then always, if you ever get anything out of your canning jar that's got a little hunk of mold on it or it doesn't smell good, sometimes you'll see a little bit of black, and I mostly think that's okay, as long as it's not mold or furry. But if there's ever a bad smell or a chunk of something moldy, just err on the side of caution and dump that down the drain and move on down the road. Hi, I'm Katie Platten, and this is a Prairieland Market Community Education class. Thanks for watching.